Tēnā koutou. Thank you all for being here this afternoon and inviting me along. And I put a disclaimer on the talk first. I don't think I can beat the previous ones. It's not near as exciting as that. Yes, so just bear with me. And I guess with this, my presentation is going to be a bit more of a hodgepodge of talking about forestry, site species matching, joys of ecophysiology, which I'll explain to you in a moment, before I talk about forest flows and water quantity and quality. So first I'm going to introduce, explain what SCION is, before we talk about the drivers of forest productivity. Then I'll be talking about site sensitivity, also matters. But what do you think? We'll talk about the importance of tree forestry trials, recent ones as well as research in the past. Before we talk about an example of the applications of tree ecophysiology and the drivers of forest productivity using Tokyo as an example. And then I'll segue over to talking about the Forest Flows program and give a bit of a show some first results from the program of what happened in the one of the catchments we have research sites out of the Maharangi Forest and how it acted during the January 27th extreme rainfall event or summing it all up. So SCION is actually a brand name for the New Zealand Forest Research Institute. We are one of 7 Crown Research Institutes throughout New Zealand. Some clever person a while ago decided we needed to have a brand name which goes down the angles of the branding of New Coke, causes confusion for years. And we stuck with FRI, New Zealand Forest Research Institute. That makes a lot more sense. But it is a government resource organisation that leads research, science and technology in development of sustainable forest management and tree improvement, forestry biosecurity, risk management and mitigation, wood processing, wood-related bioenergy and waste streams and other materials, and forest-based ecosystem services. So our charter is focused on forestry, which includes plantation forestry, but also other planted forest mechanisms and what to do with all those wood products at the other end we want to use it. So, drivers of forest productivity. So, there is a range of things that affect trees and forest growth, be it exotic or indigenous. They can be broken down by climate, soil, genetics, and stocking. Site productivity drivers vary by region, by forest, by compartment, by stand, or within the stand. It vary a lot, and lots of unknowns. The productivity drivers are complex. There's a lot of direct as well as indirect effects, and there's really one factor. So I always think about physiological limits to growth is a forest ecosystem black box. You plant a tree, you plant a forest stand, you try and do some management techniques, you walk away, then 20, 30, 50, 100 years later you come along and see if it's grown or not, or if you compare different management methods and see which ones work and which one doesn't work. And you can say, well, this method A did better than method B, but you don't know why it kind of got there. This happened as the black box. So physiological limitations of growth is looking at all these various factors that affect growth directly of the tree, within the tree as well as the environments of the tree. And tree physiology is understanding this black box, understanding what makes this tick or what makes trees or forest ecosystems tick. And a lot of these physiological limitations also directly interact with the tree, but also indirectly and indirectly interact with each other. So there's a whole bunch of interactions going on there to affect the growth. So understanding the ecosystem, black box, and its interactions gives us the ability to pull the right productivity levers for growing one species or another, or identifying locations that would be suitable for one species or multiple species, and help with decision making for folks like yourselves on if you're weighing out which tree species to plant, which will work where, grow fast or grow slow, and whatever meets your management objectives. So I want to bring up an example of carbon sequestration. It's something that Claire had mentioned about talking about this. And carbon forests is a thing these days. It's good to see the carbon price go up in terms of sensitising forestation, but there is a bit of shenanigans that goes on in terminology with carbon sequestration. So I wanted to bring an example of 3 eucalyptus species: Eucalyptus globulea, Eucalyptus vastigata, and Eucalyptus regnans. And it's kind of talking about wood density, tree size, and growth rate. So Eucalyptus globulea has higher wood density. That's what that red line is showing there. And Eucalyptus and vastigata and regnans have similar wood density. So you would think, wow, I want to grow trees for carbon. I want trees that have high density wood. That means more carbon being sequestered with the tree. Right? Well, not quite really, because if you look at the growth patterns of these 3 species, and DBH is the stem diameter of these each trees, and on the x-axis and the y is the height. Globulea grows a smaller tree. It doesn't grow as big, and doesn't grow as high as vastigata, and indeed Eucalyptus regnans, where it's so well, it makes a bigger tree. So when you actually put in the line about how much biomass equals carbon on a graph like this, the globulea, which had the higher wood density, is actually sequestering less carbon per tree, and thus per hectare, than say Eucalyptus vastigata and Eucalyptus regnans. And the regnans in the end, when you start looking at larger trees, start shooting off about how much biomass it has, just because it produces a bigger tree, even though it has less wood density. So, just as an example, I'm not saying rush up and go plant eucalyptus tomorrow, but this is a classical example of how these numbers need to be weighed up when you're thinking about, if you're thinking about planting selecting a tree species to sequester carbon. So back to drivers of productivity. Site sensitivity. Hill slope position matters. Not in terms of erosion, but where then the slope is. If a tree species is close to the top, it's more wind exposed. It's down towards the bottom, that's more sheltered. However, being closer to the bottom means usually wetter in those conditions. And then you also get convex slopes. Convex slopes go dry during the year. During the summer, concave slopes are wetter in the summer. And that has a huge effect on how trees survive and grow. Even for radiata pine is seen as a very site-sensitive species. Forestry sector likes it to plant it anywhere where it will know how to perform. But this is an example of a trial in Canterbury. And in the foreground, in a little gully next to the Waimakere River, where the gentleman standing up there is 6'6". He is next to his trees are about this high. The trees next to me are about that high. They're planted at the same time. And this is just a small change in elevation, and the trees in the foreground are just happier because they're wetter, and they're living the conditions more than where Alan is standing in the background. So these have huge implications of slight hillside positions for more sensitive species. This is an example of a study done by Siraj Salikin for his PhD, and this is using Eucalyptus globulea. And these got different graphs of A as looking at the slope, is it concave, is it convex? And the other one, the B, is kind of looking at another position of the slope. The C is looking at a wetness index, and the last one is this like height position from the top. And I guess the main thing to look at is like survivability. So the main thing is those lines are different. And those lines are different because there's a little sweet spot where this Eucalyptus globulea likes it, doesn't like it wet, doesn't like being on the top of the hill when it's windy, and likes being in the middle. And it does like things a bit wetter in there. So this is where we can apply tree ecophysiology to understand what makes trees tick, where it's more sensitive, where it's less sensitive, and say here's some areas where this species or a series of species can grow, and that information will help with decision making for identifying for various stakeholders to where they're going to grow. This is a trial in the Wairarapa in Ruanui Forest Park, and this is a range of different indigenous species grown over about a 12-13 year period. And it's great trials. I've got multiple species there. It's been well replicated. Of planting native species in some farmland and understand for the wider area of what will grow well, what will grow not so well. And this provided information of where these different tree species would grow. And for everyone, what stood out the most with what was growing really well was the line at the top is, of all things, red beech. We never would have thought beech species would do well. Red beech do particularly well. And even the other beeches are doing pretty well. Even black beech is in here, is kind of growing in the middle of the track, but that was because it was grazed by the deer that was jumping the fence. So in terms of like understanding what can work and what can grow, these trials definitely these newer trials, old trials can help provide information of kind of weighing out what works and what doesn't work. Now, so talk about the example of the totara as an example of physical limitations of growth. This is a master's student of mine, Ashley Way. She finished a PhD. She had a hard time. She was trying to finish up right at the beginning of the pandemic, so that was loads of fun. And she looked at a range of research sites of totara throughout the North Island. And all the research previously with totara has found there's no linkage with any site variables of what can grow, like hill slope position, soils, rainfall, etc. No one's been able to pin it down. However, her research used some more tree physiology, more modern approaches to analyse it, and she was able to find the various site factors listed here, was able to relate to total productivity of a model of explaining 95% of the variation, which was amazing. And it was all these different factors of some temperature, rainfall, this kind of general stuff. But we found that within locations, within a stand, a farm, a forest, in like particular types of soil, when it didn't get this particular type of soil, it didn't grow as well. It was amazing to see how sensitive it was when they can relate to all these different site conditions, soil conditions, elevation, soil fertility, etc., etc. And this is an example of some corresponding research for the same project that came out of the scientific paper, actually this year. And just all these different factors of where there's sensitivity things. If it wasn't sensitive, the line was flat, was like just flattening. If it was sensitive to total ground conditions, it was moving around. And this work, that work actually did, and this paper was two different methodologies. This was using more machine learning approach, and then both kind of corresponded to similarities of sensitivity of growth, of what total was more sensitive to and what total was less sensitive to. And this work with machine learning methodologies was used to develop a series of maps, initially for MPI, around the emissions training scheme and tables. And by the time I did this work, MPI just wasn't interested in this work anymore, but that's another story. But we ended up producing a map of a range of different exotic species and indigenous species across New Zealand. And this will give people to decide, okay, out of, say, these 5 species in this particular location, 3 of the 5 species seem to be doing well. I think I can get this amount of growth to grow, this carbon. This will grow really well with carbon, this will grow, these 3 species will grow, these 3 species will produce this amount of carbon. So that gives you the opportunity, if you're thinking about planting trees, which ones you want to grow. You can get a better feel for what can be done and what can be not be done. Because unfortunately, in the ETS carbon sequestration game, there's been a few people been overselling what individual species can do and and understanding what they can't do. And also, this was, if you want the non-scientific version of this research, if you go to the New Zealand Plant Forestry Association, the New Zealand Green Tree Grower, it was in the November 2020 issue. So switching gears to the Forest Flows research program, as Martin mentioned, it's a 5-year program, and we have 19 different collaborators throughout New Zealand and the world, including Chile, Australia, Europe, and the United States. And the research kind of came out with questions about actually the start of the 1 billion trees scheme way back in 2015, 2016, where there was before the WWT program, there was increased concern about water availability and quality, concern about large-scale forest plantings. There's increasing questions about how much radiata plant other tree species would use and downstream impacts for water supply. There's been a lot of intensification, especially in agriculture in the last 30, 40 years, and the forestry sector's changed quite a bit too since the 1980s. And now people are increasing demands for water quality and quality, so people are starting to evaluate, well, what are those planted forests on the headwaters on these catchments and basins are doing in terms of water. Add to that, little research has been done in forest hydrology for the last 40 years. Who remembers catchment wars? That's a saying that they went away, especially with the questions that have come up these days. So there's been a lack of data and information, and information has been good in the past, but it hasn't been enough to answer the current questions that are in there. And when you don't have any information, you get people that quite happily to give their thoughts and commentary on what's going on to fill in the black hole. And some of the examples on the right-hand side is there. So, and then add to that is the lovely weather we've all been getting over the last 12 months. So I say 12 months, it's starting about what hit the South Island last year, and the events of like the Auckland anniversary floods. How did planted forests perform during these rainfall events, and did whether making things bad, worse, neutral in the grand scheme of things about the in terms of flood. Also, there has been some research on and off over the years looking at water quality comparing exotic forests versus native forests. This is a lot of work that was compiled by my former colleague Brenda Bailey, and where she compared some various range of concentrations of, on the left-hand side is nitrogen types of measurements, and the right-hand side is phosphorus. And for these previous studies, the exotic forests and indigenous forests were kind of overlapping in terms of the concentration, the range of values for total nitrogen, ammonium, oops, that was a good trick. There we go. Total phosphorus and DRP. Now there was some previous research looking at, that said the exotic forest range higher concentrations of nitrate in comparison to indigenous forests, but some of the data from the exotic forests is a bit questionable, and that's some of the work that we're looking at forest flows to see what the concentrations of nitrate are in those forest systems. So Forest Flows is trying to understand all these different processes that are going on in a catchment and watershed. Normally we measure rainfall going in, stream flow going out, and everything else is at best approximated, really measured. So we're trying to measure everything that's going on in there, with three main objectives of quantifying planted trees water use, with focus on radiata pine, planted forest catches water storage, how much is stored and for how long, and where does it go, and planted forest catchments water release. Is this water, does it get stored up in winter as a sponge in these catchments and then slowly released in summer, or does it take days, weeks, months, years to come out? Not very clear. And it's going from a 1D, 2D black box approach to a 3D drivers approach. So we are trying to understand what's going on mechanistically, tree physiology, and actually understanding what makes things tick in a hydrological sense. In the trees, in the root zone, in the soils, in the vado zone, which is this bit that's not saturated below the tree roots and soil, and what's going on in the groundwater. And we're also very interested to see what does it mean three-dimensionally. So does tree water use, storage and release in one end of the catchment differ from the other end of the catchment? And if it does it actually mean anything when you start talking about this as a catchment or a forest level? So to answer all those lovely questions is that we have been measuring the last several years using an integrated set of measurements of terrestrial and remote sensing. We're using data from satellites, we're using data from periodic measurements with planes, airborne platforms, above ground data with sensor networks, which are some of those pictures We'll see on the left and right there, it's given us continuous data from our forests, as well as data from above ground and below ground in our sites. So I'll call this the throw the kitchen sink approach and see what we can learn and see what we can find out. Also, we are trying to quantify nitrate movement and leaching in forest catchments, and the picture of instrument there is the methods to quantify catchment nitrate flux. Is for the first time ever measuring, putting these 5D sensors throughout the research sites throughout the country and measuring nitrate in the streams continuously and see if those concentrations change over time, and if they do change in time, tie it into trying to identify what's going on. Also, we have deployed these what we call resin light cylinders to measure changes in concentration of nitrate in the soil. So we're trying to see if there's any nitrate hotspots throughout the catchments and see if we can tie that into any spikes in nitrogen concentration in the stream. So, Forest Flows sites is over 10 sites throughout the country. The yellow pins, I should have make it a bit clearer. The yellow pins is our primary research sites and they're over a rainfall gradient. So we have a research site in northern Canterbury called Ashley Forest. It has the lowest rainfall, 800 millimetres per year. We've got the wettest site just over the Southern Alps in Marfetta Forest on the coast at 3,000 millimetres per year. And we've got 3 sites in the North Island that have kind of in between, including Maharangi Forest just up the road. The data, kind of like what was been talked about previously, is we try to get these continuous data out of the forest, and we have developed a near real-time environment, big data to transmit data from the forests and wireless mesh networks, and that was a huge challenge to transmit data out of there. And that's coming out of 6 out of our 10 sites of collecting this data so we can get it. Instead of spending years and years and years collecting data and then trying to analyse it, we're trying to analyse it as soon as we can. And it also gives us a way to monitor what's going on in hydrology in these forests near real time, and also to analyse them as data comes in. So this is an example of our primary research site. It's Ashley Forest. We have 25 plots on the ground to measure what's on with the trees, water use and growth, but also soil water changes as well as stream flow, what have you. But we have trouble trying to scale from these essentially 25 points of measurement throughout this catchment and moving it accurately to catchment to forest scale. And this is where we're bringing all these various remote sensing techniques in there with to kind of help with go from individual plots to catchment to forest scale, so we can scale up accurately and scale down. See what that means. So really quite good. I mean, despite the many challenges, that was before COVID came along with Forest Flows. We have collected lots and lots of data, and we are busy analysing to see what that means. However, we have challenges of getting the data into a format that go from super complex to actually be understandable with our stakeholder groups. We have 3 stakeholder groups. One's in the far north, one's in the Tarawera district, and the third one is in the Wairakei district. And we have been working with these groups the last several years to understand what questions they would like us to answer with part of forest and tree of water use and hydrology and trees and water really, and trying to provide this information. And some of these discussions we've been working to develop types of tools to translate our data, our results into something a bit more digestible, even for us, more digestible. And it's including these what we call hydrological models, where kind of schematic representation of water coming in. P is rainfall, E is evapotranspiration, and Q is kind of what we call water going out, and arrows represent the size of water moving subsurface, and that's what our colleagues at MBIE are busy working on at the moment. And something I'm particularly proud of is developing an online 3D soil catchment water movement tool, so we actually see with our data water moving through our catchments in real time, and how the water moves vertically but also laterally through the catchment to give us a better understanding about what's going through there. And I'm just amazed about looking at this tool that's come out there, or how it operates. It's not a linear wing comes to the top of the catchment, moves literally down to the outlet. It's very complex and very fascinating what's going on there, and helps with for the terms of, we hope will help understanding for our stakeholders. I want to be understood in the what's going on in the local forest for our stakeholders, but also for our people who understand these things on a more nationwide basis. I also put a plug in here is that Forest Flows doesn't have a stakeholder group in this area, even though we've got a research site, private research site just up the road in Hydrology Forest. So if there is interest in this community through this Forest Bridge Trust or other groups, we'll be more than happy to share our results with you from this Hydrology Forest early next year. Finally, here's some first results of what we got out of Hydrology Forest. I should say that Forest Flows was not just primarily focused on what would happen in permafrost extreme rainfall events, but hey, we could easily measure what was going on. And this is the data that was collected from the January 27th event. The blue lines represent the rainfall, how much rainfall was coming in per hour at our research site just up the road here. The January 27th event was split out into 4 big events, but funny enough, the first one being the biggie, what happened on January 27th. And this is the data that our NIWA colleagues kind of looked at what was going on during the storm event. During event number 1, there was over 30 hours, there was 229 millimetres that came down out of our rainfalls. Huge amount. And the hydrograph is kind of like how much water was going out the other end. ETA is evapotranspiration, GW is groundwater, runoff is how much water is left the catchment in terms of flow. And so with all these numbers, I'm like calculating what was going in and what was going out. With it's great having a lot of data to actually work this out. Was out of the 229 millimetres, NIWA calculated that 59% of all that rainfall made it to groundwater. So not only just went into the forest, went through the soil, didn't run off on the soil, penetrated into the soil, absorbed the soil, and ended up in the groundwater. So the total amount of runoff was about 40% of the amount of rainfall coming in. So the stream still flooded, there was still a lot of water that went out of it, but it was able to retain majority of that water. And in a very shallow catchment with shallow soil too. It's quite fascinating. So in summary, understanding the physiological black box helps to improve to understand what and where to plant different species. Another factors required to need to be considered for selecting trees for carbon sequestration. I haven't touched on today around management of soil culture. Those are big things about effective site preparation and most importantly, follow up after establishment to make sure you keep on top of the weeds for the first few years. So all these other factors need to be in there, weighing up the options of growing one tree species or another. The cost of the plant, how much TLCs you need to grow, is it located, grown in the right place, and is that tree species going to be the objectives of what you want to do on the level of that land. Different tree species have different site requirements, it's not a one size fits all. Some species are more sensitive than others. SCION's research provides mapped info on several different species and potential growth across New Zealand. It's been, because of our mandate in the funding environment, has been focused on more exotic species, but we are switching over to more providing scientific outputs around indigenous species. The Forest Flows program uses an integrated system of above ground and below ground measurements to better understand planted forest hydrology, which includes big data and machine learning methodologies as well. This is trying to understand the tree running over time water use, planted forest water storage, planted forest water release, and planted forest water quality. That's going to be interesting. Also, I want to touch on here, we have one slide in the biography, we did apples and apples comparison of water use between radiata pine and different exotic indigenous species, because we actually don't have that kind of information to see which one uses more, or they're similar, or something in between. And we have been developing tools that can make more accurate predictions across New Zealand for existing and potential new forests to quantify sensitivity to changing rainfall patterns and drought and impact of climate change. And the promo for me is that we expect to have the position to share results from the last 3 years of actually collecting data in early 2024. So that's it for me. Thank you all for being invited along to this. And if you want more information about Forest Flows, this website is out there, as well as the company website of some research.